wanted to start off with a quick little topic because actually this was inspired by events in my classroom this past week.
Oh shoot!
Talking about
dangerous.
current day players in their all-time ranking. Sort of what, because in the moment it's kind of hard to say, who is going in what tier as they're still playing. And so I picked out 5 guys that are nearing the end of their career. One of the guys you probably would say is not near the end of their career, but still getting to that mid to late 30s range. And so these guys have, for the most part, set the cement of their careers. And I wanted to get Chad's thoughts on ranking.
I was going to say, just to be clear, we're talking NBA. I don't know if you
NBA
said that.
NBA,
so, yeah. I didn't want us to get halfway through the topic and then be like, hey,
yeah,
Adama Traore, James Harden, where do you have him ranked?
Alex Ovechkin, where do you have him ranked in correlation to Kawhi? So I'm not going to make you put like a number on these guys all time, but I want to say these 5 guys, if you had to rank them 1 to 5, so the best career obviously to the worst career, because there's 2 guys in here that I'm actually very, very interested to see what their ranking will be. All right.
Okay.
And so these 5 guys in no order. That's just the order I thought of them. KD, Steph, Kawhi, Harden, and A Day-to-Day. Also known as Anthony Davis, to those of you that don't know.
So I'll start with the easiest one first. Steph is one out of that group. I don't have to really put too much thought into it. Plenty of people will say, oh, how could you say that? KD. I think KD's great. I'd actually probably have him too. Wouldn't have to think about that very much either. But I just think Steph is, it's not an accident that he's won 4 titles for a franchise that when he got there was literally in ruins. And I know people will go with the, oh man, they brought a team or they built a team around him. And I know there are going to be some people listening who want me to give Mark Jackson some credit for the Steph ascension, which is never going to happen from me. But I just think Steph is, he's like, this is crazy as hell to say, and maybe some people might disagree. This might be one of the ones that gets pulled out as the TikToks, but I would argue that all time Steph is probably closer to LeBron than he is KD. And that's because, whatever, like, I don't know how people do it, but for me personally, like, there's that tier 1 group. Like, when I say tier 1, I mean like tier 1, where you're talking Jordan,
LeBron, Kareem,
Russell, Magic. I think those 5 would be probably the group that's like, all right, these are, to me, the best. Like, nothing's really, I'm not going to say it's not debatable, but to me it's really not debatable. Those are the 5 best players in the history of the NBA. Go ahead.
I'm not making this case. It's a legitimate question. What does Magic have over Steph?
9 finals in 12 years.
Okay. Because this is something that I was thinking about.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I think he won like 3 MVPs as well, which, Steph has the back-to-back and the unanimous, so, that could arguably be a wash. But I think the 9 finals in 12 years is kind of what does it.
Yeah, because some of my students actually, again, funnily enough, were kind of challenging me on it, being like, oh, Steph's actually the best point guard of all time. And I didn't have that knowledge off the top of my head, so I'm kind of like, I don't really have a concrete thing where it's like, oh, well, Magic has this thing over him, and 9 out of 12 finals, and 5 rings.
5 rings.
Yeah,
5 rings to 4, and he has 3 finals MVPs to the 1 for Steph. So, like I said, it's not much. And look, certainly finals MVP is not going to be the end-all, be-all of rankings, because I promise you're not going to find Iguodala anywhere close to a top 100.
Right. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Sort of, kind of. Even that, like the fact that someone can even ask the question, like, what does Magic have over Steph, kind of shows where Steph has ascended to. So, kind of trying to stay a little bit off topic, not trying to cut you off, but you said Steph. You're good. You said Steph, and then KD, and then remaining we have Kawhi, James Harden, and Anthony Davis. Now, very quickly before you give it, I kind of want to put us in a time machine to about 5-ish years ago today, And there was a legitimate claim. People were like, Kawhi is the best player in the league right now. He's going to be the best player for a while. This is right after he won the title with Toronto.
Yep.
And it was a weird time because at that time it's like, well, this is a guy that has won 2 titles and has 2 Finals MVPs. So how is he not ahead of guys like Giannis and Jokic and even Steph at that point, who didn't have one, a Finals MVP. And so people were saying just at that single point, maybe he's the best player in the league, and now he's nowhere near that. So I'm very interested to see where the Kawhi ranking is going to be.
Yeah, I'll kind of talk you through the thought process of these 3, because like I said, the Steph, KD, I think those are a 1-2 pretty
He's far
easy.
and away, yeah.
Yeah, pretty easy. And then the next 3, like these next 3 guys, I honestly could argue in any sort of order. The Harden case I'll make first because I feel like I'm low-key a Harden defender. I don't even know if it's low-key, honestly. But his longevity as kind of a individual scorer slash, the offensive fulcrum of a really good team. And look, you don't want to do that thing where you're like, oh, well, he played against the Warriors, so if he just doesn't do that, then he has 2 rings. Like, I'm not going to just automatically say that. But at the same time, we saw he was the closest person to even be able to compete against the Warriors when they were actually healthy. Obviously, Toronto beat him in the 19 finals, but that's with 2 of the 4 guys not being available. So, kind of don't count that as much. Sorry, Kawhi. Which then kind of brings you to the Kawhi case where it's like, okay.
But you do count the 15 finals. Cool.
15? Well, I mean, look, I count it because I like the Warriors, but I mean, I'm not a Warriors fan, but I enjoy Steph and I enjoy what they've done. But I don't expect any Cavs fan to say that it counts, and they have a very good argument for that. So, I think then talking about Kawhi, he obviously has the 2014 ring where he was the Finals MVP in San Antonio. And then he has the 19 ring in Toronto, the one we just mentioned. The funny thing about it is he has like 3 top 3 MVP finishes, like right there in between those 2.
Mm-hmm.
So he was really good in San Antonio, but the problem is we're talking about a 5-year stretch for Kawhi, essentially, right. from 2014 to, obviously is he still good on the Clippers? Yes, no doubt about it. But if we're being honest, he has not lived up to the heights that we held him to, or the standard we held him to when he first signed for the Clippers.
This is kind of what intrigued me about him, because it kind of gets into peak versus career, longevity, and sort of what do you value. A lot of people have kind of boiled even the GOAT debate down to that. It's like, would you rather have that 6-year peak of Jordan when he won those 6 straight titles, or would you
6 straight titles in 9 years or 8 years?
6 straight titles in 8 years when he lost in the second round one of those years, but 6 straight. But
are we telling on ourselves, or we are on the end of that argument?
I'll let the people decide. So it's kind of like Kawhi had these years where it was like Depoy, and second in MVP voting, and then third in MVP voting, and Depoy, like, clearly right in that mix as one of the best players. And then in other years, aside from that, also won titles and Finals MVPs. And I mean, a lot of people. I mean, who's the second best player on his team in Toronto? Listener, like. Okay. Oh, in the actual playoff run, it was Fred VanVleet. Like,
I mean, him or Lowry, really.
That's what I mean.
Him or Lowry.
And no one's sitting there being like, bro, super team, VanVleet and Kyle Lowry backcourt. So, I mean.
I'll still never forget Ibaka in that Philly series looking like Durant in Game 7. I think he had like 20. He had like 4 contested threes in that one. I'm like, how is Serge Ibaka taking people off the dribble for pull-up jumpers? But
he picked up a thing or 2 in OKC.
That just shows that Embiid has been cursed this entire time. So,
well, Embiid was trying to do pump fake threes against Marc Gasol, who was playing about 10 feet off of him the entire game, Game 7. So,
yeah, that was. Look, I'll always give Embiid a pass for any playoff series he had Ben Simmons on his team. That's because I just think Simmons has been trash. And yes, I was saying this in 18, 19, and 20. No, I was. Calm down. But yeah, let me not delay. And then, then that's the Kawhi case. And then you have Anthony Davis, who, the more you think about it, I feel like it's probably easiest to put Davis at fifth, just because I don't even think, like, when you talk about Kawhi, you talked about that short peak. At least for those 5 years, though, he was, like, very consistent. For the 5 to 6 years, really. I mean, the 1 year that he kind of sat out basically was San Antonio when he had the injury or whatever the hell that no one gives him shit about to this day, which is so crazy because, like, it's kind of the same thing as when we talk about the Jordan. Like, if LeBron was just like, hey, I'm good for 2 years, like in his prime.
Yeah.
Like right after, like let's say right after he won that 16 title for the Cavs, they beat Golden State. KD joins the Warriors, and then going into the season, LeBron is just like, hey, I'm good, by the way. I'll see you guys in a couple years. So that kills me. That kills me. But the Kawhi thing, too, like, if LeBron did that, or hell, even if, I mean, really any guy, like, I actually don't understand how Kawhi kind of just escapes, and maybe it's just because,
he
was
in
San Antonio. Yeah, he ended up, all the teams he's kind of been on have not been teams that have been in, like, the public spotlight, I would say. San Antonio, Toronto, or the Clippers. So that's interesting. The more I've been talking about it, I think I've kind of constructed my final list. I'm going to go Davis at 5. I'm going to go Harden at 4. I'm going to go Kawhi at 3, KD at 2, and then Steph Curry in the 1 spot.
Yeah, it's just...
The only argument I can really make is between the 3 and 4 between Kawhi and Harden.
Yeah, the only reason I threw Davis in there, and I know people listening would be like, oh, Ethan, you're an idiot. Why are you throwing Anthony Davis in that list? Over a 6-year span, those last 5 years in New Orleans and the first year in LA, this dude was 26 and 11 on... which is insane, on like 52% shooting and top 4 finishes in the Depoy 3 times, got a top 3 MVP finish, was obviously an all-star the whole time, first team All-NBA 4 of those 6 years, and it's just like, man, I feel like because, again, like you said, the small market thing in New Orleans and then the second banana to LeBron thing kind of has derailed a little bit of the part. Because, I mean, when it was like 18, 19 range, there was legitimate talks where it was like,
he's not in the NBA.
I say he's not the, like he's not LeBron. But if you had a game tomorrow and you're like, hey, we got to win tonight in San Antonio or whatever, who do you want on your team? Or like, I'm starting a franchise, who do you want on your team? Anthony Davis is by far and away. Now, to be fair, that starting the franchise thing also led people to pick Karl Anthony Towns around 2020 range. So take that with the grain.
That was closer to like 15, 16. By 2020, people knew it Towns. They weren't tricked anymore.
So
but I mean, the Anthony Davis, like in 2018 playoffs, I'll never forget that first round against Portland where he just goes off. Him and Drew Holiday. They I think they swept Portland, beat the hell out of him. He might have put up, like, honestly, close to, like, 35 and 15 a game in the series. And, going into the next round, they're playing the Warriors, and people are like,
Yeah.
And I think Steph was hurt at the time, too, so they're like, hey, man, Davis can take him to 6. Davis can go to 6. And, it's like, man, would you want anybody over Davis right now?
Yep.
Exactly, what you said. So, maybe Davis probably does have a bit more consistency than I'm giving him credit for. And the weird thing is, though, like, he kind of had those 2 years where he was kind of dropped off for the Lakers, the Westbrook year. And then it was also like just, I don't know, maybe I've watched too much of him in LA where you could just see moments where he's just like, him and LeBron are like kind of talking after the timeout, and it's like, can you believe these fucking guys? Like, seriously? Like, look at the rest of this group out here, and they're so bound and determined to be like, hey, we don't need to go hard or care, but we will sometimes. So, but last year he was amazing. He was amazing for the Lakers second half of the season. So I was to say, like, could he put together another 2-3 year stretch where, he makes maybe another run or something like that? I mean, because the Lakers have made him kind of their offensive guy more so now, especially this year, but even last year. So it'd be interesting to see. It's a debate that's not completely closed for at least one of the guys. I think you would safely say AD is probably the only one that can kind of still, for the most part, do stuff to his legacy.
Yeah, and me and Chad have kind of talked about this a couple times when you talk about sort of this era of player. It's like, oh, they could. What if this guy won another title? It's kind of like, well, it kind of depends. Like if LeBron goes to the Nuggets, I'm not saying this is going to happen or predicting, but it's like if LeBron goes to the Nuggets and plays with Jokic and averages, 16 and 10. Does this? It's like, oh, well, LeBron got a 5th ring, so he's up there.
Right.
He passed Jordan. Like no one's going to say that. Or
Right.
so even if a guy like a Harden or a guy like a KD, which impossible for that guy to win another title, would it really change anything? And that's where it kind of comes down to, because really for that title to be a career-changing thing, you have to be the guy, and I find it kind of hard to see any of those guys being the guy on a title team, except I guess maybe AD, but he wouldn't get the credit for it because he's with LeBron.
I wouldn't completely rule out. The only one of those I could 100% rule out, I think, being the best guy
Is
on
Kawhi.
a title right now. I think it is, just because I don't think in the last 5 years, he just hasn't had the consistency aspect health-wise.
Right.
So, so I guess maybe even saying Harden is a stretch, but the other three, for sure, I think I could still see them all being faces of a title team. Now, granted, the teams they're on just really aren't good enough this year to be title teams.
Yeah, I mean, when Harden was averaging 36 and 12 and he couldn't get to the finals, I'm going to pretty safely say that he's not going to make it now with his current situation.
Lowly likely that's going to be happening.
Yeah, so I'm glad we did a small opening topic that lasted 20 minutes.